Welcome back to What's New with Mead. We are in episode 55, and I have homebrewer and Discord legend and just wonderful man himself, Kyle Ducharme, here to chat with me all about his mead making experience. And I've seen it in action. I've tasted his meads, so this is kind of a fun thing to full circle. Maybe hear about some of the stuff we've tried. He's also been featured on the channel at least once, maybe more, if I'm not mistaken. But Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to sharing some experiences and just chatting about my favorite thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I think the way people can get to know you easiest is to learn a little bit about you. So how long have you been making mead?
So I've been making mead since 2019, probably toward the end. So coming on 4 years now. And during that time, we obviously had the pandemic and some time to kind of dive deep into hobbies, and that's what I did. I really doubled down during some of those lockdown periods and just kind of went right in, as a lot of us do, and just started absorbing all the different sources of content via podcasts, internet forums, Facebook groups. Then I found through watching YouTube videos and whatnot, I stumbled across your videos and doing the most videos, and the Discord community came up, and I really jumped in there and really just started to share experiences, but also just glean off of others what they learned. And it's one of those things where I only have so many buckets to ferment with. I only have so much honey and fruit to make projects out of. So learning from others is a great way to go, and kind of seeing what do you really want to pursue and what you want to tackle yourself and add your own twist instead of just copying and pasting.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people get started, and I know I did for sure. I looked for some staple recipes to start with, stuff like Joe's Ancient Orange. You know, everybody knows it. You've probably seen a Viking Blood recipe floating around. You've probably seen Bray's 1 month mead, and those aren't bad things to start with by any means. But it is fun to put your own little twist and kind of say, "Hey, what can I do to make this a little different?" Have you made any of those staples before?
I haven't made a Joe's. I don't really even want to at this point. I just kind of want to make like that modern version, mainly like a orange creamsicle would be a fun thing to do. But no, I haven't really made a lot of the staple recipes a lot of people went after. I've made something like a Viking Blood using hibiscus and different fruits and other spices, but that's really not how I started. I actually really just started with cider in general, just because we have a lot of apples in Vermont. And I have a twin brother, and he was actually into fermentation before me, but now he doesn't really touch the stuff, just the things I make.
That's fun.
Yeah, but he gave me his equipment, and I started making some batches of cider. Um, they turned out kind of rough. So then I said, "Oh, I have this equipment now. What else can I make?" So then I looked online for mead recipes or just things that I could ferment with, and it said some of my searches came up with cider, wine, or mead, and I was like, "What is mead?" So I just found some honey and I made it traditional, and it came out like really, really bad,
Yeah.
infected and just awful. And I don't even really know why. I just kept going with it, but I was like, I got to figure out how to make something good from this. I know I can do it. I have a food science degree, and I can figure this out. So I was like, I'm actually going to do some research, not just throw ingredients together. And that's really where I started diving into the online forums and whatnot. I think my first like really good recipe was a bochet that I used. It was like I called it my maple bourbon bochet, and I just
Ooh, that sounds good.
I did a bochet, and then I added a bunch of maple syrup that I had, because Vermont is one of those places where we have excess maple syrup, which is a great luxury to have.
Yeah, I was gonna say it must be really tough, man. Oh,
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that was really my first like um, recipe that really just kind of solidified my mead making. Where friends were asking for it, friends in the beer game were asking for it too, and from there I just never stopped.
that's funny you mentioned Bochet because I'm moving pretty soon, and so I'm kind of at this point where I'm purging bottles, and I've been sitting on bottles for a long time. One of them is this Bochet. Is my first time ever making a Bochet, and it's now I want to say it's almost 6 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And so I've just been sitting on it, like one day I'll open it. First of all, I guess I got to peel back this label, but I don't know if you can tell. Look how stained the
Yeah,
bottle is.
that's crazy.
It is so like I almost got concerned. I was almost like maybe I shouldn't drink this because it's so stained. But Bochet's are really fun, not just because they're good, but because I feel like they have such a potential to age. Like this was not stabilized. I didn't really even know what I was doing, honestly, when I made it. It was probably like the eighth thing I made, and it's pretty dang good. They are very beginner friendly, I'll say, if you do them right.
Yeah.
And I think you adding like maple syrup, it's a hard thing to hate on maple syrup. I don't think I've ever met somebody who's like, man, maple syrup is the worst. Like it just doesn't happen. And so I would love now that you're saying this to do that combo of Bochet, maple syrup. That's got to be dangerously good, obviously.
Yeah, it's when I was looking at that bottle, I thought it was almost an amber bottle at that point.
Yeah, it's wild. I don't have many bottles that do this, so that was kind of fun. But you said something about wanting to put your own flair on things, and one thing that I love about watching you make mead and you talk about your recipes and stuff is everything you do definitely has a little bit of your food science background. You saying, hey, I have a food science degree makes total sense now because you and I have had some wild experiences with some recipes in the past, including a Lactamel, which some people might know this if they've watched the channel, but you were the one to bring forth the Lactamel journey into my life and to really challenge me to make that. So I got to ask, what was your idea when you said, "Hey, let's make a Lactamel"? Like, where did that come from?
I found I wanted to make that Lactamel recipe based on just Discord feedback and just trying to kind of reinvent not to do something out of the ordinary that I wouldn't just do on my own accord. I wouldn't just um, I wouldn't randomly want to like waste any honey or experiment with honey and different
Yeah.
ingredients. So um, I wanted to just see what the kind of the pulse of the Discord was, and I try to do with my mead making now, where I take ingredients that people suggest and combinations, and just add them together and try to kind of step out of my comfort zone, but also using good mead making practices that I've learned, and um, I just find it fun, especially doing these smaller 1 gallon batches, and but yeah, Lactamel was kind of just like what was polling that day, what was just
Yeah.
um, coming to fruition. It could have been really anything.
So, give me an example of maybe a combination that you had in your mind that went really well together that you were surprised by, and then give me a bookend of something that you thought would go really well together and maybe did not go so well.
Yeah, so um, what's definitely gone really well for me has been using various peppers or a single spice along with a fruit. So I've made a lingonberry mead with cardamom, and it was the first time I used cardamom, and I really enjoyed utilizing that. And I didn't really have any great expectations because The only time I have cardamom is in chai tea and like various Indian food and whatnot. But
Hmm.
I wanted to see how it would go, and it went really well. Cherry and chipotle, great combination. Um, I had a strong feeling that would go well, but it was just kind of like there's a risk of going too far with the spice. There's a risk of not highlighting the cherry or honey enough, and just those things came a lot better than I was anticipating. The other one that I really enjoyed is just using nuts. I sent over. There's a kind of the contested mead of the walnut fig, and
Oh yeah.
last year at Mead Stampede, that was the one that was
Hmm.
kind of that polarizing one, and I won a best show medal with that, and a lot of people really like it. But at the same time, I know people that are really, really not for it, and that's another aspect of mead making. It's I make things that some people really love, and at the end of the day, I really like a lot of them. But sometimes I need to give it to the right audience or enter this competition where it's like, yeah, I don't really want to taste that all the time, but it's kind of neat, and judges would like it and appreciate it. So here we go.
Yeah. Huh. Well, so I remember that one. That was interesting, especially hearing post. You know, you talking about scores in some places and others, and I kind of want to dive into the competition stuff in a bit because that can be. You've entered a lot of competitions, so you'll be able to speak into some of these things. But you did mention cardamom. How do you or how did you incorporate your cardamom with your brew?
So with cardamom, I used whole spice. I used as fresh as I could get. Um, this was green cardamom. I ordered it off Amazon. We don't have a lot of specialty spice stores in Vermont, so um, it was one of those things where, especially if I haven't used an ingredient before, I just like to try to get something off Amazon and get it as whole and fresh as possible. Um, With cardamom, I lightly toasted it to bring out the fragrant aromatics. I just did it on the stovetop for 5-10 minutes at a low heat, so I wouldn't burn anything. But
Where'd you get that idea? Did
just
you come?
cooking.
Did you think? Okay, so that's a cooking trick because I didn't know that. I'm very unfamiliar with cardamom, so that seems to me that would not be my first idea is to like, hey, let's throw it on a pan and see what happens.
Because they to me, I just treat it similar to like how I would with cocoa nibs. Cocoa nibs I've also put in the oven and
Hmm.
done that, but I was using such a small quantity of cardamom that I just figured that a low heat on the stovetop would be okay. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to release some of the aromatics so they could volatilize into solution and get uh, extracted by the alcohol in the mead. I do like to play around with tinctures, but I this time I just put it in a brew bag, a little reusable tea bag. They're so cheap off Amazon,
Hmm.
like it's crazy. So I have like 500 of them, so I could use
Wow.
them at will. And so I just waited for the cardamom to cool, and then I put it was about half an ounce in the tea bag, cinched it up, threw it in my finished lingonberry mead, and then had it sit for 3 days. I think I should have pulled it out at 2 days, but it's
Mm.
one of those things where um, sometimes spices will fade, sometimes um, they'll grow in the aging process. But I was pretty confident with the way the level of acidity in the lingonberry mead and the fruitiness that it could stand to the level of cardamom that was in there. And it wasn't like so out of bounds that I was mad. It was more like, oh, this is a little bit too much for my taste right now. But that's freshly after tasting and pulling the bag out. So I I usually do that with a lot of meads is kind of the tea bag trick, um the spices post fermentation, but I do like the control of tinctures a lot. And I have used that, but there's something like little more like visceral and hands-on about interacting with the mead more often once you have spice in there.
Yeah.
So I do a combination, really.
I'm definitely a fan of tons of tasting with spices. I think it's interesting. You noted some spices you need to let set for longer because they will mellow out over time, and some will actually get more, you know, hot or more strong over time. And there's not like a conclusive book or Reddit post or anything that says like, cinnamon grows stronger or cardamom gets comes down. Like that's untapped research that I think that the only way we're going to figure it out is having people use more spices. And of course, there are 1.5 million variables that come with that because there are 1.5 million spices in the universe. And then you get to the specifics of, well, are you using this specific cinnamon? Because that one does this or that one does this. And that's just like exciting territory to jump through, but also a little bit daunting. And that might be something that we start a collective document on the Discord or something to say like, hey, you really dive into this is your year to use more coriander. And I want you to try and just tell us, what do you notice about coriander at this point? And then we just kind of compile things. But spices are fun and they're just a challenge to use well. You can go over spiced on things real easy and you just hope that it will mellow out or get stronger.
Yeah, definitely. It's also interesting that like there's just the base meat as well that is interacting with the spices. So there's just so many different variables on that regard too, and just kind of what profile you're after anyway. And um, it's definitely nice to lean on people to kind of quote unquote specialize
Mm-hmm.
in a spice or in some sort of process that they come up with, and they share it with people on Discord. And that's what I really love is like none of us have the time to go down the rabbit hole with all of these, but if something's like really piquing our interest, we can go down that hole, share it with others that are in this hobby. And I've been finding that there's a lot of good that comes with that, and a lot of collaboration and camaraderie.
Yeah. Well, and it could be something, I'm now I'm on my brain is thinking about the ways to do it. But to get, let's say I buy a 60-pound pail of honey and we get 30 people with 30 different spices. I send out 2 pounds of honey to all those people, and then you have your same honey base. Obviously, water, you're never really going to match your water profiles unless you send water too, but that's just impossible. And then, you say everybody use the specific yeast. So you're making a traditional plus whatever spice. There's your variable. And there's a lot of research that could be done and probably should be done that could be helpful because we're all in the same boat of trying to use ingredients well. And while it is very fun to be adventurous and to throw things into a bucket, there's also a bit of fear that comes with that. A bit of like, there's a chance that I make something that's not good and I'm going to dump it, or I'll drink it, but I'm not going to enjoy it as much as I want. So maybe that's something we'll discuss. Maybe that's a good YouTube video. It might be a long-term one, but who knows?
Oh yeah, I love the sounds of that.
So let's dive a little bit now into your competition space because you are a competitive mead maker, and I feel like part of me feels dirty saying that because I don't love the sentiment that comes with mead makers who are only like metal searching or metal chasers, as so they're sometimes called. So I'm not referring to you as that. What I am saying is that when you do submit meads, whether you intend to or not, you have been successful. And I want to kind of dive deep with that a little bit. You mentioned that a lot of your stuff, for lack of a better term, is experimental. Now, that doesn't always mean it goes into the experimental category, but do you find yourself putting meads into one specific category more often than not?
Well, I intentionally tried to kind of cover the gambit of the categories out there. Like I have like if I'm getting low on traditionals, I try to make a traditional, or if I am getting low on a base fruit mead, I try to do that, and various fruit meads too, whether it's Pyment Sizer, just traditional, just a kind of a conglomerate mellow mel, really anything. I try not to stick to one category too much. I think I have more things that I could enter as experimental. Um, Definitely braggots and historical are like my lowest, both entered and made things. And I think part of that's just like my process, but also part of it's the categories as well, because some of them are on the harder side, but also some of
Mm.
them require different things. And but yeah, I try to be balanced with it.
And do you, when you are submitting things, a lot of competitions will say dry traditionals, semi-sweet traditionals, and sweet, or dry, mellow, mel, semi-sweet, blah blah blah. Are you finding yourself making more sweet or semi-sweet or dry stuff, or is it really just depending on the brew itself?
It is depending on the brew itself. I would say for the competitions that really kind of are just mead centric and they kind of go into those dividing of subcategories in that way of dryness, or by actually expanding on the subcategories themselves instead of having just um, traditionals, melomel, spice, and then like experimental or other, like those kind of four hierarchical categories. And some competitions just do that, and some
Mm-hmm.
competitions just have one mead thing. I try to enter more of the ones that have really spread out diverse categories, partially just so I have a chance to medal, but also so that my meads are getting compared and tasted against things that are in the similar vein, and not where a judge would have a Dwoniak versus like a lime session mead in the same flight.
Yeah.
Um, I just feel like the judges could better calibrate their palates to something that's divided up like that, and that's where I find the most feedback, the most relevant and helpful feedback is when it's in that format.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
but yeah, I
that's
would say
definitely true. Like, so doing the most has he was submitting something to a competition here in a beer mostly competition here in Oklahoma City, and there's a mead category for it. The mead category, he had plans to submit this specific thing, and then he found out that it was all going to be lumped together in just one big old category, which is not a bad thing. And like you're saying, it's not a bad thing, but it's also not great for some specific things. And he immediately, after he found that out, was like, I don't really want to submit this specific thing to that because it's kind of niche, and the judges aren't they're not going to be ready for something like that if it's just coming off of like a sweet traditional or a really sweet mellow mel or whatever. Because I feel like a lot of those that the tasting experience is dependent on what came before what you just had. And if you go from dry to sweet to jalapeno mead to a blah 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 back to back to back, like your palate is just going to be kind of shot. Same thing goes for if you're tasting things that are all sweet. If you all you do is drink sweet meads for 2 hours straight, by the end of that, your palate is going to be shot. So you kind of have to have a in between or a break or something in there to reset yourself. But it is super hard to, I don't want to say get good feedback from those competitions, because I guarantee you there are great judges who are giving good feedback. But it is harder to look at what their feedback you're getting and know how relatively true it is to the things they've had, because you have no idea what came before your mead, and so that's kind of tough. Again, if you're listening to this, this is not a reason to not submit meads to those competitions, but that's something to consider. Is the people who are tasting them are humans, and they're going to have experiences within that, and you can't really curate whether or not they're having a sweet mead before yours or blah blah blah. So, you mentioned your key lime session mead, and there's another Discord member, Larry, who's also a big key lime pie mead person. Yours is not specifically key lime pie, or is it just key lime in general?
Oh, I was just referring to a lime session mead versus a big bold cognac
Yeah.
that has like the micro-oxidative characteristics. I have made some lime meads, some lime sessions. I've made a key lime pie sack strength mead that really did not turn out well, and part of it was the honey choice I used and
Hmm.
just improper balancing of flavors. And um, but it's something where I definitely go off the Discord of like, oh, I've tried this, but these aspects I didn't really like about my process, and you've tried it and you've done well with it, and also have had good feedback, and you've really taken a deep dive. So I definitely take inspiration from folks like Larry that uh, have that recipe that's proven, that has a lot of passion and hours put behind it.
Yeah. Those recipes are fun because you're right. Larry, like I've seen Larry walk through the process of taking that recipe from day one, essentially version one, to whatever he's at now, version probably 10 by the time he mastered it to his total recipe. And that is hard work. It's hard to really nail down something like that because it takes so much trial and error. And key lime pie, I've noticed this, especially with anything that it's a dessert. People have such a high expectation of it because they've had a key lime pie before that maybe was just incredible. And it was their grandma's or mom's or the store or restaurant. And it's hard to emulate a food that is solid in a liquid form. I recently was experienced that. I've been trying to make a s'mores mead recipe for a long time. I feel like everybody has been like, I'm gonna do it at some point, you know. And I tried. I don't know that I really nailed it, but taking something that is naturally very crunchy because of graham crackers and then saying now I'm just gonna liquefy it and I want to be able to drink it doesn't really like. It's just not the same experience, and you have to know that going into it. Like, this is not going to be a key lime pie blended up like thing I'm drinking. It's going to be a liquid representation that is as close as humanly possible. So I found that kind of fun. Did you notice anything about your key lime pie experience? Like, did you have any weird expectation when you first tried it, or were you aware that it was liquid, unlike me?
Um, yeah, so that's interesting because there's just a lot of nostalgia around certain desserts, especially, and there's like a lot of like these reward mechanisms in our brain for things that are sweet and just the end of a meal or like something special. And so key lime pie was actually one of those things, especially for my little brother. He wouldn't really eat a lot of normal foods growing up, and one of the things he ate all the time was actually a key lime pie yogurt. And
Oh,
every year I would make him a key lime pie for his birthday. So it's something that like was something I've practiced a lot of. It's We don't have like access to a lot of fresh key limes in Vermont, but at the same time, there's that knowledge of, oh, this is a tradition. This is something that we do all the time. This is a expectation. So the fact that I tried it pretty early in my mead making process, and I think I would be a lot better at making it now. It's so my brew list is so long that it's hard to get around to it, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. But I think a lot of those things require um, that palate training, the sensitivities to um, both analyze it in the present, but also be like, okay, how is this actually like comparing to some of my memories?
mm,
How is this more than just this sensory experience, like right in front of the glass? Like, it's not just this mead that's in front of me. It's something that is going to trigger something. So it's something within me, and it's kind of that interaction that goes next level. And I think really well crafted and thought out, both food and alcohol are those things. It's trying to create that experience. It's trying to create a response that's more than the sum of its parts.
yeah. Well, the nostalgia factor is something you have to consider, especially with something like that. and it's hard to beat. But when you do it and you make that thing that makes the person remember back when they're 8, eating key lime pie yogurt, like that is, I feel like that is such a cherry on top of the mead making experiences, bringing back those feelings. You mentioned your brew list, or to brew list, I should say. What? Obviously, this list is large. What's something next on your list? What's one of those things that you are like right now preparing to make, or soon enough preparing to make?
Yeah, so summer is actually a time where I don't make a lot of things. I
Oh,
focus on making like session meads that are made with usually Kvike Voss, or things where I don't have access to temperature control. I can push out, but also are refreshing and in the moment. I really cater my brewing toward the fall and winter. Winters in Vermont are pretty brutal at times, so it's a great thing to have. And what I actually do a lot during the summer months is I go picking for berries and I forage and I try to find things that are just unique to the place that I'm in,
mm.
whether it be the quality of that black currant, for example, that I pick or whatever. Like, people can grab things on Amazon, like I've been mentioning, or another supplier that is kind of mass. But if you have really good quality things in your environment, it's it's kind of a shame to not highlight those. So that's what I've been trying to do lately, where I've been trying to source local honey that is like up to my standards, that is delicious, or like I try to work it in certain recipes. I try to get fruit um, that's really good up here, whether it's berries, apples, stone fruit, anything like that.
Mm.
But that's really what I try to focus on, and that's really what's in my brain for my to brew list, is highlighting those recipes.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you serve, or you wait to do a lot of these other brews that are not session meads. Session meads are generally quick turnarounds, 1 month, 2 month, which I love about them is the fact that they are so quick and so crushable at a quick pace. So when you get to those winter months and you are brewing things, are you brewing things that are still session strength, or are you finding that you brew things mostly above 8%? Like, where does it start to fall for you when you get to that different season?
Yeah, when I started at first, it was more like 14 to 16. Um, but now I try to focus on like 9 to 11, and then like 11 to 14. So like I try to have a mix, because I want things that I can have more than just a small glass of, or something that can age. And so I want to have like a mixture of those things. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I asked this because I think as we get better at mead making, we learn a better process. The time it takes to make a good brew starts to shrink. And obviously, there are some factors that really can affect how quickly you can enjoy that brew. For example, ABV is one of those. If you're pumping out things that are 18%, you're probably not going to want to touch that thing for quite some time. And, obviously that, I don't want to put a time limit on that because it could meld really fast and yada, yada, all the hypothetical situations.
Yeah.
But looking at something, let's say that is 12% or 11%, you can, with good mead making process, you can drink that thing at the 3 month mark, 4 month mark, if you've done things right. Now, will it be if we're talking a bell curve, at the top of the bell curve, the max best as it is, maybe not. But I think that it is definitely feasible. So you came into the mead making world and you probably heard some things about making mead and how long you need to wait. What were some things that you remember hearing when you first started in the brewing scene about the timeline of it?
Yeah, I mean, I heard the whole like wait 2 years kind of thing, but at the same time, I kind of just chalk that up to, oh, people are just chucking raisins and doing
Yeah.
the making it on the third moon of the year and doing their dance on the hill with lavender kind of thing. And that's fine if you want to make mead that way, but that's really not like a scientific approach or anything that is reproducible. And it's just not the way I want to be making mead. And so that was quickly disproven, even with some of my like bigger stuff to begin with. Like I had meads that when I first started, it's like after 4 months, were 16% were fine. And that's with a pretty rudimentary process that I had then. I wasn't really diving too far in at that point, and I was still able to get some pretty decent things quickly. As my palate has gotten better, as I buy a lot of commercial meads where I can. I judge meads. I'm a mead judge. I um, make a lot of different meads, and I invite my homebrew club to make a bunch of meads. And through that, I've experienced the good, the bad, the ugly. But also just like my uh, investment in this hobby has increased as well. I've been finding that when people say that they just are, that's the old hat, they're thinking about something that's not in the current reality of the hobby. Um, so I just kind of find it funny at times, but
Well, so you mentioned that the you've started to drink more mead that's not your own, that's commercial. You've probably had some really good stuff, like you said. You've also had some really bad stuff, like you said. I think everybody who starts, and I was true of this too. My first few meads, when I tried them, they were my kids at the time, and I mean, I was like so proud of them, and I was just like, they could have been the worst tasting thing in the world, I think, and I still would have been like, oh my gosh, I thought this thing is so good. I'm like so proud of what I made, and that's not a bad thing. Like, please don't hear that anyone and think that I'm like saying that's a bad thing, but my lack of experience with quality mead didn't really necessarily yield me to go to be critical in a real way of what I had made. And so the only way you're going to get better at mead making is to actually drink mead that's not your own. And hopefully you'll stumble upon stuff that is good, because those experiences will help you figure out like what good mead does taste like. So I'm going to use, let's say, Schramm, for example. Everybody knows Ken Schramm. If you don't know Ken Schramm, then I'd be surprised. But notable mead maker. He does make some great mead. If you are able, or you have the luxury of ever getting ordering a bottle from him, something like that, or let's say Meridian Hive, if you want something that's lower ABV, or Moonlight Meadery, stuff like that. Take any meadery from around the U.S. that's notable. If you're able to order some, you should do it. I know it's a $20, $30, $40 venture plus some shipping, but that little bit of research is going to help you learn more about mead making and how to taste stuff that is good. And plus, you might get some motivation / inspiration from that flavor and go, ooh, that blueberry and cardamom was super, super good. I want to go and try and make that now. But I remember being super young, thinking I had made the best thing in the world. And I don't think I was necessarily right. I didn't have a great process. But the process you have will help you yield a better mead. So you're saying you've had an experience where you've made something that's 16% and had it drinkable in 4 months. Was this something that did you do anything extra special in your process, or was it just the base process we have nowadays?
So I think part of it is the fact that I was using this was toward the beginning of my mead making, where I started using fruit and I started doing the punch downs, and I was very finicky about things at that point of sanitization and um, actually thinking about adding nutrients um, and incorporating the nutrient process into the punch down process. And um, I think a lot of it had to do with actually incorporating some of the practices that are commonplace now. Um, and also with a lot of fruit, it can be self-balancing in a lot of ways where it adds some tannin, adds some acidity. You don't really need to play with it as much to make it as drinkable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I still don't think it was amazing at 4 months old, and especially at that point, my palate wasn't as refined as it is now. But I still distinctly remember, like, oh, I don't need to wait 2 years for this. Like, this is good now, um, and I think like when people dive deep into the hobby, they'll see the connection to the wine world, to the that kind of process where you're a lot of the times you are interacting with fruit. A lot of times you are interacting with processes that are 95% akin to the winemaking world, and we're just dealing with a little bit of a different medium. Um, but what I wanted to mention as well with that, in the whole kind of wine comparison, that they have it figured out after so many, like hundreds and hundreds of years with that tradition, is that for the when you're going out and buying commercial mead, there's a new competition that opened up this year that's called the U.S. Open, and it's sponsored by the Mead Institute. And what they had is they had a variety of judges from the wine world, and acclaimed sommeliers and cicerones and whatnot from the beer world, to approach mead from a service standpoint, from a quality standpoint, and they awarded meaderies different medals based on how good it was. And some of the meaderies that I found really, really good scored in that 90 point range, and had got some hardware. And I think starting from that list and looking at that, and those folks did a lot of the work of kind of vetting that for us. And I think that's a great place to start for a lot of people who want to go on Vino Shipper and buy some of those meads and expand your palate that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so you said, well, first of all, yes, that is a cool new thing that the Mead Institute is like. I kind of got plugged in with them at the very beginning of their launch and stuff, and now they're doing some real stuff, which is kind of fun. So if you want to check them out, they're hopefully going to continue to push the mead community slash education world further. Obviously, they're doing stuff with the meaderies themselves, and I think probably helping to give some greater standards. So I'll be curious to see what they do with all of that. But one thing I found funny, what you said, kind of in the middle of all that, was you said at the time you'd made that 16%, you were pretty a stickler for those standards for your nutrient additions and all of those things. So now that you have experienced using nutrients and doing staggered nutrient schedules, proper nutrients, all those things, do you still do a lot of that to this day? Do you find yourself doing a staggered nutrient, or are you like me where you do a lot of front loading at the 24-hour mark, or where do you find yourself landing most brews now?
Yeah, so now I don't really have like a set standard of, okay, this is just mead. I'm going to do the TOS and the nutrient additions. It's not the case anymore. It's more of, okay, how much nutrient do I need in total for the requirements needed? What yeast am I using? How much yeast am I using? What's the AB? What's the starting gravity? All of that. And then like just timeline of the mead making process. So with session meads, I do a lot of front loading. With the stuff that's around 9 to 11%, I usually do like two editions. So I do like after 24 hours and then a 48. Some of that's also due to work. Like I travel a lot for work now, and I need to kind of adjust it for my life. And um, but if it's something where I'm really pushing a yeast strain, and um, or it's something where I'm using an excess amount of fruit and it's a very costly batch, like that's where I'll be a little bit more diligent of, okay, like these are practices I've used in the past, and I know at this percentage that the yeast will struggle a little more than at the session strengths. I'm going to go back to those original practices and be a little bit more of a stickler and not just pitch up front. What happens usually is I find that 90% of the battle is just getting those nutrients in there. Like after that point, there are some minute things that can change, but some of those things are more likely to age out than if you don't have the nutrients in at all. But like for making when I'm just like kind of fooling around and making recipes that I know that I'm not submitting to a competition, that I'm just gonna enjoy with my partner and just all of that, I can be a little more lackadaisical, and a lot of that's because it is like closer to more drinkable percentages. And but yeah, I've definitely changed my process based on what my overall outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
Whereas in the beginning, it was like very much like, okay, every time I'm gonna try and do this and be a stickler about it.
I definitely I feel the same way because I when it comes to money, if it's something that I am investing a pretty serious amount of money in, I'm gonna for sure baby it. And I found myself doing that with not as many batches recently because a lot of the stuff I've been doing is lower strength, lower cost, and I kind of get a little bit lazy and I'll just start to 24 hours, I'll front load it, and it's kind of nice, not gonna lie, to just like you said, get the nutrients in there and kind of forget it until it finishes. So I don't know that there is like it'd be fun to do a side by side, a Tosna versus or a stagger nutrient versus a front loading. You know, that's a whole other YouTube video I could do, I'm sure, and have a lot of fun with that. But regardless, those nutrients are very helpful for that brew, and I feel like I have a great example in front of me with this Bochet. I remember drinking it 4 years ago, and it was not 3, I don't know, when it was a couple years old. It's sitting at like 14-15%, and I remember drinking it at that 2 or 3 year mark and going, ooh, it still has some fermentation heat, and it still has a little bit of fermentation funk. And I recall thinking that it's faded now at this point, but it's taken close to 6 years for everything to round out. And I don't know about you, but I don't love waiting 6 years to drink a mead. I don't like, no matter how good it is. That's a long time to wait. It's got to be a very special bottle for me to wait that long. So using the proper nutrients is going to change how you brew. Whenever you're logging your brews, are you doing it? Are you a pen and paper guy? Are you a Google Sheets, Microsoft Word, whatever it is, Excel? What do you do?
I just have a notes app on my phone and just I
Oh,
record things there.
okay. Really?
Yeah, I just do it there, and then what I also do is I like there's some communities where I post some of my things just kind of as like a backlog, but I usually just take a picture as well. I don't like to post about everything, especially since I've been more competitive lately. I don't want people to know, like, oh, I'm using this berry and that berry, and
Yeah. Uh-huh.
you have never heard of this one, so this one's going to pop up. And the community's so small that I don't want to have a judge be like, oh, that's definitely his mead.
Right.
But
Well, you mentioned lingonberry earlier. Do you know of there's a specific candy that's main flavor is lingonberry. Do you know what that candy is? I'd be curious to see if you it's a well-known red candy. I'm gonna put
um,
you on the spot. I gotta
yeah,
give you
is that a Twizzler?
not
I don't know.
Twizzler. It is Swedish fish.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
So I
That
recently
works.
had an experience with them. I was doing something kind of silly with them, and I learned that. I looked it up and I was like, what the heck is lingonberry? I've never had lingonberry before. So, but you mentioned that and I was like, I wonder if he knows about the Swedish fish real flavor because I had no idea what it was. It was a weird one.
Yeah, I've heard of that, but I I haven't done a lot of like hoochie adjacent meads or brews. I did one with peach rings, but that one turned out actually kind of good. But
Yeah, I could see that.
um,
I could see that going well. Did it? So my experience with candy hooch has been all over the place. And all of the gummy versions I've done between Sour Patch Watermelon, Twizzlers, I gotta rack my brain for those other ones. Did it melt or did those peach rings just kind of like there's like gelatin in there that doesn't really dissolve? What ended up happening with that?
if I recall correctly, it created this like it melted, but it created this crazy foam in the
Oh,
fermentation. Like there was this crazy cap on it, and I remember brewing it in my I had like a Mr. Beer kit, um, and I used that little root beer looking barrel. um, and I also used some apricot preserves because I was like, I kind of just want to use peach, apricot, and just I knew that that apricot went well with enhancing peach flavor. So I was like, I'm going down the road anyway. Let's do this as well, and it turned out pretty decent. I also added peach Jolly Ranchers to that too. So
whoa,
it wasn't just all peach ring. I think if I did it all peach ring, then I would have more of that mass. But
ew! Don't
yeah, I don't.
that mass. That's not a good term to
Yeah,
use with brewing. Oh,
yeah, it's like with lactamel fermentations. Like sometimes that layer on the bottom, the sediment is pretty rough looking.
yep.
Um,
I had that with
I'm
the
like, I'm not used to
Twizzlers.
this in any of my brews.
Yeah, I had that with the
Yeah, I
Twizzler.
remember seeing that video and I was like, oh no.
Man, that was probably one of. I mean, I've made some really gross stuff and tasted some really gross stuff, but that was up there. And I would not recommend anybody enjoy Twizzlers in the whole form that they are. You don't need to make them into hooch. You will just waste some money. But peach rings, though, that does sound kind of fun, and I think that it's actually surprising. Like the Sour Patch watermelon was a surprising one for me. Whenever I made that brew actually turned out to be okay in the end, and probably because it had fake flavorings, stuff that was not going to ferment, and so it just like there was sugar plus this fake flavoring that was still lingering around, and so you know that's again not to say go spend your money to make a Sour Patch watermelon mead. Go spend it to make something with better honey. Don't waste your money on poor candy.
Oh yeah.
So you were very active in the Discord, and you I love getting to watch you help new mead makers in their journey. It's kind of fun when people come with questions and they're like, "Hey, how do I do this thing?" And to see you jump in because you are super knowledgeable. Is there anything for someone who might be a newbie to the mead making world right now? They're on their first brew, the second brew, something, in that realm. Do you have any advice for somebody who's just getting started to help them continue to grow in this?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple things for sure. I would say my mantra, when like talking to people about mead making in general, is pretty similar. Where I just focus on, they just need to get kind of the basics down of sanitizing, just like the language itself, and accessing videos around that's a really good way to have a one-stop shop of, okay, there's a visual explaining it, um, there's maybe even a word on the screen showing a definition, like what you and Doing the Most do. So I usually point people there to start because I don't want to just like go over their head with different things and have them go down the wrong page. So wrong path. So I try to direct people to these resources, like the Reddit wiki. These places have done a lot of that legwork, and not highlighting those resources is kind of a cruel way to go, and or is not as helpful as just trying to re-explain it. It's also what I did too. So um, the other thing, what I always ask is like, what's their goal? What do they want to make? And then I try to give them helpful hints of like lower ABV is okay. Like you don't need to try to create rocket fuel and uh, go to the moon kind of thing.
Right.
I always talk about yeast selection. Nutrients are like we've been talking about, so crucial in this process to making things that are drinkable quickly. And that's the other thing about lower ABV stuff. If it's at 18%, you can make a good one. It's going to take a longer time. So with beginners, focusing on that like 9 to 11%, where it's like high enough where things will be a little bit more microbially stable, but also where it won't take 10 years to really, or it won't take a lot of time to be drinkable. Having that happy medium where there's like it's a little more forgiving on one end, but at the other end, it's also drinkable and where they can enjoy the fruits of their labors. Other things I like to do is just introduce, is just, yeah, figure out what they want to do with mead making, whether it's they want to create a recipe for Christmas that year, or they want something really nice for the summer, or they want to um, impress at a family gathering, like, or they just want something to drink.
Hmm.
Because I think knowing those things will cater your advice. So yeah, that's really the way I approach it. And then just kind of guiding questions from there, whatever they really need, because I don't really know exactly what experience they have, but after giving them the resources and then learning a little bit more about where they're coming from, that gives a really good base to cater advice.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you're saying, especially because using the expertise of other people who have been through it many times is going to save you some heartache, probably save you some money too. I think to also prepare people just to say your first brew, let's say even if you have step by step process, something could go wrong. It might not end up exactly how you want it or you thought it would be. And don't let that one experience tarnish your desire to do more, because I feel like that happens sometimes. People or actually invest, let's say $50 into a gallon or 2 gallons of mead, and then it does not turn out very good. And then they're like, well, that was a waste of money. I'm never going to do this again. And I love that your story started with you basically said, I made something. It wasn't very good, but I was like, I'm not ready to give up. I'm going to figure this thing out. And I hope that more people can have that sentiment. And I see it sometimes on the internet because I live so much in the beginner world. Sometimes people are just giving up after one. I tried doing this. It wasn't for me. I'm out. It's like, that's a bummer because you've only done it once. It's like, shooting a basket, trying to go to a basketball court and shooting once, not making it and going, well, I guess I can't play basketball. It's like, well, yeah, you can't after one shot. You got to do things multiple times. So I hope that people feel encouraged to not only keep going, but to use those resources. And Kyle is very active in my Discord, in the Doing the Most Discord. I think I've seen you floating around in the Mead Hall Discord, which is also another big one for Discord people. But use Kyle's expertise and people like Kyle who have been down the road of mistakes and successes and have won medals to your advantage. Don't let those people just watch you fail. Ask what you can do. And I don't think any of us are going to say no when you ask a question. Now, that might not be true of every person you ask, but I think most of the people that I've experienced, like Kyle, are ready to help. And so I'm super thankful that you are active in my Discord because it's fun to see the stuff you're doing. And like you said, you're kind of keeping things closer to the chest nowadays, for good reason, because competitions are fierce, and obviously we don't want to give away all of our tips and tricks. But I do enjoy seeing the stuff you're making in the Discord and outside of it.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of that stuff that I'm doing for like keeping things closer to the chest for competition, that's me trying to like give it my best shot for like this year in particular. With like, I really want to do well with Mead Maker of the Year. Just give it a shot. I know that there's a lot of game to competitions, and that like it's okay if I don't get every medal that I want or whatever like that. But um, after this year, I'm going to be more focused on um, doing higher, like less entries to those, and just trying to share more with others. It's kind of just like a graduation step in my mead making journey, where I'm feeling a little burnt out on like super high entry volumes for my supply, and I'd rather just like share more with other people, whether it be actual like doing bottle swaps with other mead makers, or um, sharing more of my process and more of my projects. Because right now, like I would say 80% of my projects are geared towards competition, and I would rather it be 20% geared towards competition than 80%. So I'm gradually taking that turn, and that's where in this hobby it can be so different for so many people. I I would consider myself like someone who is a little bit on the deep end of this mead making hobby, and I know others who are even deeper along into it. But at the same time, we all have our reasons for doing it and reasons for making, and I think people should try to focus on what that reason is for them and keep paying attention to it year by year, and to try to avoid burnout, but also to have fun with it. And this year is going to be my competition year. After some success last year, I'm going to go after it more this year, and whatever happens happens, and then I'll reevaluate. And then next year I have ideas already, but I think it's important for people to focus on like why they're doing what they're doing with their hobbies, their time, their money, and
Yeah.
just have fun with it, really.
Well, part of it, like you said, volume. The really like I'm gonna say really competitive mead makers who submit to every competition, who are out there to win the Mead Maker of the Year award kind of thing. They are making like their batch size is probably 10 to 20 gallons of each thing, because they're having to send 3 to 4 bottles to 20 to 30 competitions for the year. And then they're left with who knows how much at the end of it. And I believe both sides of the fence are fun. It's really fun to make something, be proud of it, to win an award, because that's just like an affirming thing. But it should also be just as affirming, in my opinion, to go give that to your mom or your grandma or your friend and share it with them and go, man, this is good. Because that same feedback is, both are so valuable. And I hope that people are not hearing competitions are like the end all be all, because it's not how it is. In fact, what you're saying, I think, is quite the opposite. It's, I enjoy doing this, but I want to do this for me. I want to do this for my friends. I want them to taste mead too, because I think that should be our goal, is to help mead grow. That's the only way we're going to get to a point where there are more meaderies than any other brewing source, which we got a long way to go, honestly, on that front. But I love that you are passionate about mead, and we need people like you to not only just help new brewers, but to continue to push the craft along. And it's really fun to see you make recipes and win awards and do that stuff. So I hope that I see your name up there in the medaling department for some of these competitions this year. There are quite a few happening, and so I'm not going to ask you to list which ones you're going to, because I know that's also part of it. It gets to be a little bit weird when it comes to judges and knowing people that are also entering. But I hope to see your name in some of these future competitions.
Yeah, I hope to see yours as well. It's great seeing other folks in the Discord too, and talking about like, oh, like how was our feedback, and what things do you think you can work on from that feedback. And like, also there's sometimes where it's like kind of bad beats where you feel like the judges weren't quite there, like on the same wavelength as you with your entry, and these things happen, and it's nice to kind of vent with other people who've gone through the same thing. And that's really nice. But yeah, with my mead making this year, I would say most of it is toward those American Mead Maker Association competitions. They're just the mead focused ones and vetted ones. But yeah, there's some others that I won't mention because they're on the smaller side, or
Yeah.
things that are more local to me. But I'm also going to do some judging at more local things as well. And
You're going to be at
looking
Mead
forward.
Stampede, right?
I can't actually go to Mead Stampede because it's a conflict with work right now. But I decided to throw some things your way that I haven't mentioned in the Discord. So,
Oh, all right.
It's gonna
keep those
be
close.
yeah, it's gonna be an interesting time for the judges. So I'm looking forward to just hearing all the fun that happens at Mead Stampede. But yeah, I
Well,
wish I was going.
we're gonna miss you. I was hoping that I would get to see you and hoping you're going to judge, but obviously you get the other side now. You get to submit stuff and be a part of that. So I'm excited for that. Kyle, thank you for spending time with me this evening and chatting about your experience. Again, if you want to get to know Kyle better and also see him and have conversations like this, join the Discord. Join my Discord. It's the link in the description. For that, it's the easiest way to get to it rather than me spell it out. But you can also join the Doing the Most Discord if you're already part of that one. He's also involved there. Your name on both of those is Green Mountain Mead, correct?
Yep.
So you can find him at Green Mountain Mead. If you see that name, that's Kyle. And he'll be floating around, and he will gladly answer questions. You can continue to poke his brain and see kind of do what I've done tonight and kind of see what kind of information you can get from him because it's fun. He's a very knowledgeable mead maker. And who knows, maybe at the end of this year, with you submitting all these AMMA comps, we might see your name up in some lights. Who knows? We can only hope.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So, anyways, thank you so much for your time, Kyle. And we will continue our conversations in the Discord. But until then, we got to say cheers. I haven't seen you drink anything tonight, so you might be cheers in an empty glass. But cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.